You can't go to negotiation and say, I want this or nothing.
Then
it's no longer negotiation.
What else did you ask for?
Police. So that I can sort out. None of them is equipped to deal with this mafias, with this murder rate we are saying. South Africa needs me for this time because I will deal with this coal mafia, this load shedding people that is causing us to have load shedding.
Yeah.
All the gangsters. I mean, like, I'm equipped because of my...
Now, in light of Gayton McKenzie's push for the Patriotic Alliance to have the cabinet assign it the Ministry of Police, Gayton McKenzie, in this interview with JJ Tabane, is actually really breaking down why he's really equipped to handle, the violent crime that actually has heralded South Africa. South Africa has actually, unfortunately, been now termed the murder capital of the world, taking over from El Salvador, with Nayib Bukele claiming that El Salvador has become the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. But South Africa seems to have taken that baton as being the murder capital of the world with as much as 22 murders per day, and that's really alarming. But anyway, in this video, Gayton McKenzie explains why he's equipped to handle violent crime, to handle the violent gangs in South Africa. Let's listen to how he describes what he would do when he becomes Minister of Police, and I'll be back for some really interesting analysis on policing in South Africa.
I think it's a failure on all of us. I'm counting myself in those parties. I think it's a failure that history will be very unkind. History will judge us, that we couldn't put our egos, our grudges aside and form. The main thing is, and this is something nobody speaks about. There's two things nobody speaks about. I think the first one is there's an easier path for the ANC to go with the EFF, the PA, and the IFP.
Yes.
But no one can take that risk to put the heads of Ramaphosa in the hands of Gayton McKenzie. The fate of Ramaphosa. President Ramaphosa's fate in my hands is the Patriotic Alliance, in Malema's hands is the EFF, in Sabisa's hands is the IFP.
Yeah, they're afraid that you can pull the plug anytime.
You can unplug power from them at the last minute. And I think it's smart politics to have different people.
So that you have a cushion.
You have a cushion. So if I get there Friday, the PA on Friday, in all likelihood, will vote for the retention of the president.
Yeah.
And they're scared to say it because they are being dishonest with people. We've been talking to the ANC.
Yeah.
And they are lying to the people here saying, no, we don't know yet. Because there's nothing to consider. Let me tell you the truth.
Tell us what's happening.
The PA on Friday
is voting with the ANC.
Is voting for the GNU.
Yeah.
The only thing that can make us turn, if we don't get the things we want.
What do you want? You want the Home Affairs?
You see, because
are you serious about that?
Very serious. You see, it's what you've told people. We've told people. Abahambe.
Yeah.
I must not know when they say, yes, mining, because I'm in mining. Yes, the Minister of Mining. All of a sudden now I forget about Abahambe.
Yeah.
I forget about it. That's not the politics of the PA. That's number one.
But do you think there's a likelihood that they agree to that because they are also seeing it as an electioneering thing for the future? That if they sort out the immigration thing, that would be kudos for them. If you sort it out, that's going to be a feather on your cap.
You can't go to negotiation and say, I want this or nothing. Then it's no longer negotiation.
What else did you ask for?
Police. So that I can sort out. None of them is equipped to deal with this mafias, with this murder rate we are saying. South Africa needs me for this time because I will deal with this coal mafia, this load shedding people that is causing us to have load shedding.
Yeah.
All the gangsters. I mean, like, I'm equipped because of my past life, my future life, my current life to deal with it. So I come to them and say, all right, President, you don't want me to have Home Affairs. Give me police. But I'm still going to chase them when I'm in police. You see,
So
all these burdens,
one way or another, they must
all
go.
these burdens they've taken. But you can't come and say to me, there I must work with SASA. What am I going to do?
Why would the government give up a police service to an opposition party?
Well,
That
government,
would be
you must
a
understand.
suicide.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
There's people, there's millionaires, they get all the tenders.
Yeah.
They never greeted me. I
Okay.
beat them in the ball, I beat them. Now, he's taking off the head. Tate McKenzie, Mr. McKenzie. Because now, power is gone in KZN.
Sure.
So it makes them humble.
Yeah.
So the ANC must not commit the mistake of being arrogant.
Yeah.
They are not in a position.
But so far in the negotiations that have ever happened, you get a sense that the ANC is in a sense recognizes the moment, that this moment is not of arrogance, because the way they approached even their election result was very commendable.
No, it
You
was.
know, I mean, at 40%, you'd have expected the ANC to be the first one to say, no, this is not believable, because all of them told us that they're going to get 2/3 majority and what have you.
No, I must first
and
commend
selling
the
us
president
stories.
for his speech. That was a statesman speech.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the president gave a speech of a statesman
Yeah.
to say, listen, the electorate has spoken.
Yeah.
They might have not have spoken the way we would have wanted them to speak.
Yeah.
For me, I think that was it just shows how our democracy has matured.
So tell us now, because you've been in the, in the belly belly of these discussions, how is it going to look like? Are we talking DA, IFP, PA? What is the permutation now? Because nobody is talking. I thought Tlabisa saying, well, I agree with GNU, but in sort of nebulous terms.
Now, let me tell you first that the GNU the question the ANC asked us was an intelligent one. Do you want to form part of the GNU? I think that for me was just very smart, that Mbalula did there, the SG. So they ask. Some party says we don't know. PA said, no, we want to be part. We want to be part of this thing. Because our people that voted for us have no jobs.
Yeah.
They have no opportunities. Their CVs get thrown in the bin. We need to change that now.
Really brilliant. What do you guys think? The PA rode their bicycle, as it were, metaphorically, on the Abahambe rhetoric. So, in other words, kicking illegal foreigners out of South Africa, and Gayton McKenzie argues that kicking illegal foreigners isn't just the goal, but it's also in a way the Patriotic Alliance bid to fight crime, violent crime, to fight the drug problem in South Africa, to fight the prostitution problem in South Africa, and many other vices that characterize South Africa today negatively. And so, he's arguing that he's equipped to handle that office, and taking over from former Minister Bheki Cele, under which it seems that South Africa's crime rate increased. It's argued that Gayton McKenzie has more of the action and understanding of the way the mafia and the gangs operate in South Africa. And he seems to have an outlined procedure. He seems to have an outlined strategy, a coherent strategy to really end violent crime in South Africa. Really brilliant. We'll keep watching and seeing how that unfolds. But anyway, I found a really interesting article on The Guardian, really interesting on how, there's a need to reform policing in South Africa. And I thought that this video would analyze using this article for some really interesting points on policing and what policing represents in South Africa. Policing in Nigeria, or policing in West Africa generally would naturally be different from policing in South Africa, because South Africa now seems to be a multiracial space, and the ANC argues, the ANC's policy on South Africa wants it to be non-racial, non-sexist, multiracial democracy, so to speak. And so policing in this regard incubates some of that sensitivity, racial sensitivity, but at the same time requires a certain level of expertise to manage the multiplicity of cultures and, multiculturality that characterizes South Africa. And so policing must be really strategic and intelligent appointment in South Africa. But anyway, here it argues that, it says that the wheeling and dealing accompanying the establishment of a national coalition government may influence the appointment of police in South Africa. And it says that it is critical that the merits of the appointment are not just political, but they should also play an important role, especially in the reform of the police system in South Africa. It says, without a more effective police service, South Africa's democracy may continue to lose its legitimacy with the majority of the people. So, the safety in South Africa seems to, be really making the people of South Africa feel unsafe. I remember during the elections, I saw a comment, when the government of national unity was, announced, and election of a speaker of the parliament and the president, of South Africa. Some comments actually noted that, they had actually had planned to leave South Africa the next day, but because of the GNU now, they will be staying. Because of, and that comment arises because of the violent crime rate that South Africa has now been engulfed in, and South Africa doesn't feel safe to South Africans anymore. And so, in a repetition of the kind of like downward slope that policing and the security apparatus in South Africa, has represented under former Minister Bheki Cele, if that continues, we see that the democracy in itself would lose its legitimacy among, in the minds of the majority of people in South Africa. So it says that Afrobarometer surveys indicate that many members of the public in South Africa have lost faith in the democracy's ability to provide effective government. And this goes on to say, I remember one interview I listened to from Chandler Locks. I think he's a major proponent of the whole Abahambe fight. I think in the whole thing with kicking illegal foreigners out anyway. He spoke about how he doesn't believe in democracy, but he believes in, dictatorship, and that South Africa might need a dictatorship to pull itself out of the well it seems to be lying now in crime and all that. So anyway, it says that crime is ranked only second to unemployment as the biggest issue that the government of national unity must address. And it says that most of the past police ministers actually in South Africa, they have not distinguished themselves. And, particularly if the key measure for the assessment of police effectiveness in South Africa is whether they have left, they have left South Africa with a stronger police service or not. It argues here that police ministers that served from 2002 to 2012, they might wish to claim credit for the dramatic expansion of South Africa's police system, police service that happened under their watch. Okay, it says that during the period of 2002 to 2012, the number of South Africa's police service personnel expanded from 120 to 120,549 in 2002 to 199,345, in 2012. But merely employing more police has limited value, and this is a problem. So the problem is not in just increasing the number of police staff, but it seems that there seems to be a training. And when you listen to the UIM boss Neil de Beer's interview, I'll be making a video on that anyway on this channel, on Biz News. He argues that policing requires an education. Policing isn't just really about appointment per se, but he argues that a police cadet, for example, must go through an academy. Policing is an education which, the police officers must go through a rigorous set of training to attain police status, and not just by appointment. So it's simply increasing the number of staff of police, in South Africa isn't the goal. According to Neil de Beer, he argues that there has to be a formation of a certain kind of strategy that would include a form of education for the police themselves to understand the strategies of the kind of evolution of crime that's going on in South Africa to be able to meet up with the demands that requires. And so it's really interesting how the attainment, or probably what many of the ministers of police from 2002 to 2012 would argue has been that they have increased the staff in the police system, but yet the crime rate still remains really high. So it says that, the argument here is that a bigger police service is not necessarily an effective one. It argues also that another basic error made by some incumbents of some previous police ministers have been to equate better policing with greater levels of force. Okay, and the term of the office of Steve Tshwete, who died in April 2002 while serving as police minister, is remembered mostly for his statement that we are going. He says now Steve Tshwete, now this is him speaking. Before his death, he argued that he says that we are going to deal with criminals in the same way that a bulldog deals with a bull. Okay, so really interesting point to note there here that policing isn't all about just violence. Okay, It isn't all about, training or equipping policemen with batons and, police dogs to be violent, with criminals. That really doesn't, according to this article, doesn't really solve the issue of, creating security and safety in the minds of the people in the community. But, there's a little bit more to policing than just violence. It argues that also, this is a former police minister, I must have argued, it says that Nafi Mthethwa, who took office after the resignation of Thabo Mbeki and many of his cabinet in 2008, also promoted the idea that police should deal with alleged criminals by means of maximum force. Now, he argues that Nafi Mtetwa's term as minister culminated disastrously during a strike at the Lon mine at the Lomin mine at Marikana on 16th August 2012. So this is, I'm sure this is the agency behind the famous Marikana massacre, because it had this mentality of, you know, coming against crime with violent force. And we see that the issue of Marikana has actually marred South Africa's history deeply, especially here, as it argues that on 16th of August 2012, there was a really disastrous encounter between the police and the protesters at the Lone Mine in Marikana on 16th of August 2012. So it argues that after a week marred by violence, which included killing of 2 police officers and 8 others, the South Africa's police service shot dead 34 men and injured countless others in an incident that remained mired in controversy. For Mthethwa, the consequence was transfer 2 years later to the position of Minister of Arts and Culture. So the article here, the guys here pushing for a change of the trajectory or the consciousness of what the police should represent. It shouldn't always be hegemony of violence in this regard. And this has actually been one of the reasons why in Nigeria there was a popular, police brutality protest under the acronym SARS. SARS must fall, or something like that. They argued that, the Special Anti-Robbery Squad in Nigeria suddenly became more violent in their approach to policing, policing the youth in their aim to combat cybercrime and all that. And most of the youth grew restless as a result of this. And we saw really coordinated protests that got the attention of the world, in Nigeria, and led to a few deaths in Nigeria, and that actually marked a really huge scar in Nigeria's history. But anyway, this article here is actually also dissuading the thought from the incoming police ministers, just like Gayton McKenzie is pushing for here, that having this violent approach to trying to fight crime might not be the way, but there might have to be a rethinking of the methodology for policing. He also argues that some police ministers have distinguished themselves mostly by absence from the role. He says that Shwete's successor, Charles Nkakula, was seemingly appointed largely as a placeholder. Then President Mbeki may have believed that the appointment in 2000 of a senior and at that time widely respected ANC cadre, Bheki Cele, as National Police Commissioner, rendered the role of police minister largely redundant. He argues that Mbeki appears to have anticipated that Nkakula, one of his closer allies, would be able to attend to other pressing domestic and foreign political work while nominally occupying the office, and still called Minister of Safety and Security at that time. So I think it wasn't called Minister of Police, but it was still called Minister of Safety and Security. And probably this is why, a lot of you have seen the comments have blamed Bheki Cele for his redundancy. So it seems that there had been actually this previous trajectory that introduced a form of redundancy at the level of ministry or Minister of Police, that sort of like Minister of Police became redundant and just becoming a placeholder in that regard. It also goes on to say that it is sometimes said that the recently the outgoing, or I think he's actually gone, actually, Bheki Cele, was mainly appointed by President Ramaphosa in 2018 because of his status and influence in the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. But when he was appointed as minister, he was possibly the ANC MP most suited to the job, having occupied important police governance and leadership positions. But it also argues that from 2004 to 2009, he served as a member of KwaZulu-Natal Province Executive in a portfolio that included police oversight and community safety. So this is Bheki Cele's CV, as it were. It argues that in June 2009, Bheki Cele was appointed as the National Commissioner to replace Celebi, who had been charged with corruption the previous year, and when Tim Williams served as the acting National Police Commissioner in the intervening period. But anyway, in 2011, Bheki Cele was removed from the National Commissioner post based on the findings of a board of inquiry against him, though this was subsequently overturned. Now, it goes on to argue that, during Cele's time in KwaZulu-Natal, Bheki Cele allegedly also promoted shoot and kill, a form of policing, which this article argues or terms shoot and kill. It says that this has fortunately not been a characteristic of his term in office as minister. So I don't know what came over Bheki Cele, as many of you argue that, policing became redundant, policing became weak, violent crime sort of like increased. And I think in one interview between Julius Malema and one of the attendees of the EFF's rallies, this elderly, I think in a colored community, spoke about how the police has become the mafia. So probably that explains some of these issues here by this article. So the article argues that, Bheki Cele, although when he was, during his work as MEC in KwaZulu Natal, he pushed and promoted a form of policing termed shoot and kill, which was a much more really violent approach to combating crime. But anyway, when he became Minister of Police, South Africa didn't see much of this approach anymore, and this article actually wonders why. He also argues that, however, one responsibility Bheki Cele seems to have taken seriously is that of attending the funerals of police members who have been killed in the line of duty. Though it has sometimes been perceived as encouraging greater use of force by police, yes, the point that Bheki Cele repeatedly stressed was that police are by law entitled to defend themselves using lethal force if necessary. Anyway, he argues that Bheki Cele's somewhat rhetorical statements that they should not die with their guns in their hands seem intended to convey to them that where they are able to defend themselves, they should, where possible, do so. And insofar as his aim had been to protect the lives of men and women in blue, his legacy is to be respected. But anyway, it argues that a more questionable aspect for Bheki Cele's term in office pertains to his frequent incursions into operational decision making. He argued that having served previously as National Commissioner, Bheki Cele seems to have found it difficult to resist taking on responsibilities such as the appointment of task teams that should be those of the National Commissioner. The article argues that while during his term as National Commissioner, he did indeed wear the South African Police Service uniform, but then he remained a politician. And his 2 years as policeman did not provide him with much in the way of operational experience. And whether he was equipped to perform the role of Minister of Police or not, he says that it is fair to say that he has not delivered on what, in terms of the Constitution, was his most important responsibility, stating Section 2061 and 2062 of the Constitution that principal responsibility of the police minister is to formulate national policing policy. So, in other words, the article here is arguing that one of the goals of the police minister, is to formulate policing policy, and Bheki Cele didn't seem to reflect much of that task according to the constitution. And now that we see that Gayton McKenzie is really pushing for, Minister of Police, this really interesting question that JJ Tabane asked him is if South Africa would now slowly evolve into a police state, because with the perspective Gayton McKenzie has and his approach to policing, although it's not really clear yet. He's yet to make a report on that, but I suspect that it would also take on this whole approach of like the previous the article mentioned, this shoot and kill approach. His approach to engaging the mafia would have probably also lean towards Nayib Bukele's approach in El Salvador, where El Salvador engaged the defense forces, the military, to support the police in the fight of these violent gangs in El Salvador. I suspect that Gayton McKenzie would also adopt that approach because he speaks a lot about Nayib Bukele and how he would borrow a lot of Nayib Bukele's strategy to solve violent crime in South Africa. And so, like this article argues that the whole approach to forceful, tackling of violent crime in South Africa might not be the right approach because it appears to have failed previously. And so there has to be a rethinking of that approach. We see that Nell de Beer argues that police should also, the police service should actually enforce more training in the police academy to train policemen on the character and issue of policing and not just really just taking it up, which if this goes on, if this would be taken into effect, it would mean that Gayton McKenzie would need to go through the ranks of a police academy to understand policing, what policing represents, and to understand that policing isn't just all about fighting criminal gangs in South Africa, but there's more to policing about that. But anyway, this has been a lot of information in this video anyway. What do you guys think about all that has been spoken here? Share your thoughts in the comments.